Exposing your neglected nooks and crannies in public is never a good idea, so to avoid embarrassment when popping your flap at the garage forecourt, stick around to see how to quickly take your fuel filling area from polluted to pristine in a matter of minutes. So with this being one of the most overlooked areas of a car when it comes to cleaning, thought it might be worth covering, as providing you have a few simple tools and products to hand, tarting them up is a pretty straightforward affair. And while the fuel filler caps and flaps I'll be attending to here weren't anywhere near as bad as some of the fully blackened examples I've dealt with in the past, we're still dirty and overlooked enough to illustrate the general procedure for cleaning and maintaining them. Now, I had a bit of housekeeping to do before getting to grips with any cleaning here, which included the removal of a few loose ties and plastic clips that would likely just get in the way, as well as a de-sticker of the fuel flap of my own car, as I'm well aware of what juice it needs and don't need a luminous yellow label to tell me, so spent a few tedious minutes hair drying, finger picking and adhesive removing to get shut of it. And if you also know what fuel your car runs on, would highly suggest becoming a stickerless fuel G too. Prior to cleaning, it's important to check the fuel cap is tight, as topping your tank up with all-purpose cleaner and rinse water probably isn't going to end well, but assuming it is sufficiently secure, a quick pre-rinse with either a hose pipe or washer used at reduced pressure can help remove the layers of loose dirt on heavily soiled examples. But for anything else, I generally advise starting with a dry application of a water-based all-purpose cleaner like this highly effective Bilt Hamber Sufrex HD. So once applied, it'll need to be thoroughly worked into both the flap and inner fuel cap area with a few appropriate detail brushes, and I find a standard bristle general purpose item, a long reach angled Vikan one and a super soft bristled example generally provide all the agitation necessary to thoroughly rid all of the nooks and crannies of ingrained dirt. A super soft brush makes sense for relatively new, expensive or cherished cars whose fuel flaps and caps aren't that bad to begin with, but if the dirt is a bit more stubborn or it's an older, more neglected vehicle, then you're most likely going to have to step up to a more traditionally bristled brush. The inner area around the cap will generally require a bit more elbow grease and product than the flap, but either way, once you think you've paid enough attention to both, should thoroughly rinse them off and let them drain before checking your work and either repeating the cleaning process if necessary, or moving on to the next stage before any seeping residue dries on the exterior. Once thoroughly cleaned and rinsed then, for most cars I generally advise using a water-based dressing to wet dress the freshly cleaned area, much like I do with engine bays, which will uniformly enhance all areas of it in one fell swoop. While that's soaking in, you should then ideally move on to washing the outside of the car, or at least the surrounding area, to take care of any overspray and cleaning splatter, before rinsing and drying that, then the fuel filler area itself with a microfibre towel or two to remove any excess watery dressing product and leave all parts with a nice replenished sheen. Now that there's no water or excess product residue knocking about, I'd also advise removing the plastic cap just to give the inside edge of it as well as the filler spout a wipe, as there might still be a bit of trapped dirt you couldn't previously access with the cap fitted. But be careful not to drop your keys, coins or fidget spinners down there, or you'll likely never see them again. If you don't fancy a dressing, especially for the painted flap, a spray wax can quickly be applied and buffed over to add a bit of shine and superficial protection, as can a synthetic protectant, whether applied wet or dry. And assuming you're not too cack-handed at the pumps, once thoroughly buffed off, both should help to keep this area relatively clean and bright. Now, speaking of keeping things clean, in terms of maintenance, there's a few ways I'd recommend preventing this area from getting grubby again, starting by simply wiping it over with a damp general purpose towel every time you treat the rest of the car to a wash, which if you do regularly enough should realistically be all that's needed. If you need to agitate away any freshly settled dirt, then you could snow foam the area when pre-cleaning the rest of the car and give it a quick going over with a super soft brush, which when combined with a rinse should thoroughly take care of any loose dirt and grit. But if you aren't snow foam equipped or would just prefer not to make a mess and still need to do a bit more than a damp towel wipe, could instead work a shampoo primed brush over either before or after washing the rest of the car. And then when it comes to drying it off after any of these approaches, a general purpose towel is perfect for soaking up any potentially streaky rinse water, but a blow dry with an appropriate machine can be an effective option too, especially if you're already using one to dry the rest of the car. Now, you can of course go into more detail if you want, but unless you're showing the car at concourse level, a relatively deep clean like this should have your fuel filler area looking cleaner and more presentable than the outside of the vast majority of other cars out there, which means you defo won't be getting the piss taken at the pumps. So while relatively short and sweet, hopefully this video gave you the general gist and confidence to tackle your fuel cap and flap area if you so fancy, as it's a pretty straightforward affair that can usually be sorted in a matter of minutes with tools and products you likely already have lying around. But either way, thanks for watching, and I'll be back with something a bit longer and more in depth next time.